Chris a big round of applause. So we're moving on to Erin Murray. Erin Murray's a hydrologist. She was with USGS, but within the last month, she now works for the USDA's Agricultural Research Services, and it's great to have her here. We met last year because we were on the steering committee for Idaho's March for Science, and it was very inspiring and very exciting to be involved with her and half a dozen other really motivational millennials. And so without further ado, Erin, thank you.
All right, I'm Erin. I didn't prepare a story, but just kind of wanted to talk about my story, I guess, and some things that I guess being a scientist in the climate and water field has brought up in this topic. So I study water resources around Idaho, availability of water, water use by people, and also water quality. So I kind of wanted to talk about the identity section of the video we talked about, or the video we watched. So essentially I am working on the problem side of things. So I'm, as a scientist, looking to understand the problems, and that comes with the catch-22 that you're constantly confronted with these kind of heavy things. So as a scientist, you want to understand a system, you want your results to be significant, but at the end of the day, the implications of those results can sometimes be depressing, as I'm sure everyone in this room has experienced that. So I guess I wanted to I was excited to be a part of this panel because I think our message today is kind of overcoming these barriers, in talking to other people, but also within ourselves. And I think this identity barrier is really, really difficult, and Stan talked about that, but if we can all be in a room and think about each of us doing our own little piece, then the big picture becomes a lot more positive than just me working in a lab, filtering sediment and looking at that result that is sad. Then I can give that result to someone who can actually do something about it. And I mean, I guess together, I think the purpose of this panel is to be motivating so that we can overcome the barrier of ourselves. And I guess I'll let mine be short so we can have more time for questions and move on to.
So our final speaker on the panel is Mason Wood. Mason is a University of Idaho junior. She's double majoring in natural resource conservation and political science. She is a former AP environmental science student of mine and tree member. So when I was thinking of the youth voice, she percolated right to the top. So without further ado, Mason, thank you so much.
So all my life I've had a love of animals. Ever since I was little, my mom would have to hold me back because I would go running after the crazy dog down the street to pet it probably. And so for all my life I wanted to either be a zookeeper or a vet or something along that nature. And even so much so, I started volunteering at Zoo Boise, and I volunteered there for 5 years. And then this past summer I was the assistant event director. Been with them a very long time. I'm very passionate about it. But I went to the tech school out towards the mall, and I took an ecology class out there, and I had this huge realization of you can't have animals if you have no land or resources. So suddenly I became obsessed with resources. I was very passionate about soil, a little too much so.
Soil.
Conservation became my life. I was going to do everything I could to take in conservation. So after speaking this with some of the directors at the zoo, we decided to create an internship just around conservation, and I still think I've been the only one to do it because I think I'm the only one that actually wants to, but it was such a great experience, and it helped lead me into going into University of Idaho and being a natural resource conservation major. When I started, I thought I wanted to do research. I was very about it. I wanted to be in the field. If you can't tell, I really like to talk. And after I'd spoken with one of my past coworkers at the zoo, and she used to work on a plankton research boat. And she was telling me that she loved being on the boat and she loved doing research, but she loved talking about it and she'd want to talk about it, but the people there would be like, you know, I'm doing the same thing too. I know everything you know. And so I realized that like there's a lot of really great people doing research, and I like to talk about it, and I want to let people know about it, and I want to help protect that. And so that is what helped change me in realizing I wanted to work in policy, and I wanted to hopefully one day become a lobbyist and work for natural resources. And so I added political science as a double major, and my other minor is in geology. So I changed my emphasis from research into policy, and I wanted to let everyone know about all these amazing things. So I'm not going to lie, after I added political science, real downer, like, it was, and especially with everything that has come to light within the last year, I kind of become pessimistic on some of my views. And when Dick asked me to do this and he told me it was going to be a positive outlook, I thought, oh crap, what am I going to say? I have peers at University of Idaho who I'm in natural resource classes that deny climate change up one side and down the other. I've had lots of roadblocks when in my political science classes talking about these things. It's been a rough ride, and so I was trying so hard to find something I could speak positively about. And so last semester I was taking a class that is an interdisciplinary colloquium, and we have a professor at University of Idaho, Dr. Greg Moeller, and he did a presentation called The Life of P. And it is about the life of phosphorus and how he has dedicated his whole life to just phosphorus. Very interesting man. And he has created a student assembled group, and he has made a filtration system that is able to remove phosphorus from the water. And right now it was a competition, and so right now they're in the top 3 in the whole nation of this amazing thing that's going on. And they're going to make sure it's easy to access, it's affordable, so that people can use this machine to remove phosphorus. And I was just blown away. I was like, I had no idea. I've been to University of Idaho for 2 years, and I had no idea this guy was doing these amazing things. And so I started looking around just on campus to see what we're doing. In one of our largest buildings where we hold most of our classes, we have composting, we have recycling. We have people standing by the garbages every day, bless their souls, to help people figure out where they need to throw their trash away, if it's in compost, recycling, or in the trash. And we also, our University of Idaho, they've been pushing just ways you wouldn't even think of that help with climate change, like different feminine hygiene products. And just within the dorms, they've changed a lot of their ways too. So I started looking at my own life, and I'm like, well, I advocate for this. I'm all about conservation, but how much do I do on a daily basis? After I looked at my life, wow, I'm not great. And I feel like most people probably aren't. So I started making small changes. One thing that I've done, it's kind of silly, and people laugh at me when I go through drive-thrus or something. I have bought stainless steel straws, and when I tell them if I order a drink, I have my own cup, and they're like, would you like a straw? And I said no, and they're like, are you sure? That's kind of weird. And I pull mine out, and they're like, ah, and so they probably think I'm pretentious, but whatever.
We don't.
My grocery shopping has changed. When I buy produce, I buy a lot of fruits and veggies. Instead of getting those plastic bags, I made my own type of bags I can take with me, so I'm not constantly using plastic. I've made my own reusable bags. I have switched the way of my menstrual cycle, and I use a reusable cup now, and I advocate that like crazy. It makes people uncomfortable to talk about, but I'll tell them about it. I have started lobbying in Moscow. I love the idea of how Boise has started a compost, and so in Moscow I've started with the city council and talking to them about how we can probably start doing that and how they can start recycling glass and all sorts of like that. Education is one of my favorite things in the whole world. I will talk to anyone and everybody about climate change and how they can it affects their lives. I'm a part of the University of Idaho logging team. We do small things, just even picking up trash on the side of the road or going and talking to classes about like, hey, we cut down trees, but we also plant trees. It's pretty cool. And then I accidentally became vice president of the geology club, and we've had a really great time doing and we've been doing some really great things there, and like going and talking to miners and learning about how they can, trying to figure out ways they can be more effective in how they mine. So after looking at my own life and doing these small things and talking to people, I've noticed people in my life have made these small changes too. So it's really nice to see that just small things that like haven't changed my life drastically. Like telling somebody I don't need a straw, not that big of a deal. Like, and so seeing people that I know saying they don't need that either, or carrying a mason jar in their car, it's much easier than getting something that is plastic. So it's been really great to see that my education and lifestyle has been able to affect other people along the way. And I go back to what I think of Howard Zinn said, small changes by millions of people will change the world. And that is all I'm hoping to do.
You know, the quote that I left for Mrs. Stutzman is, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Margaret Thatcher. And I think we've got to continually remind ourselves of that. You know, I really want to thank Stan and Aaron and Mason. Very inspirational, what they had to say. And I'm sure you've got lots of questions. But first, I'd like to share my little story, which will hopefully add something to our discussion. I'd like to take you back to the early 70s, 1970s, when I was in high school. My father was an agricultural economist with USAID at the American Embassy in the Dominican Republic. It was an amazing time and place to be a student because I had incredible opportunities to explore biologically rich environments and learn firsthand from a new and vibrant culture. I got caught up in the environmental movement because my generation simply couldn't accept humans' willful extinction, pollution, social injustice, and nuclear disasters. We were young, idealistic, and extremely passionate activists, and our collective efforts paid off big time with the passage of America's major environmental laws. The Clean Air Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Clean Water Act, and many more. It's important to note that these laws were passed overwhelmingly by both houses of Congress. But that was then, and this is now, and things have changed, and so must we. I'd like to illustrate what's happening in the movement and reemphasize why we need to do a better job of marketing our message if we hope to regain universal support from the masses to support and prioritize personal and planetary health and well-being. So what I put up on the board here, just as a little visual aid, you know, back in the 70s, environmentalism started as a heart thing. I mean, many of you, I can see, were with us in that fight, and it was a heartfelt fight. And we were doing it because it mattered. And we took to the streets, and our numbers were recognized, and we affected politics, which encouraged business to clean up their act, okay? Well, since then, things have changed. The environmental movement has become a business. NGOs are what we see, and the emphasis today is science and the legal system. And I understand that. You know, I'm a science nerd. Nobody loves science more than I do. But what's happened is we've now got a corporate state, okay? And so what we have to do is we have to re-message what we're saying and go back to the heart. Because, as Stan pointed out, nobody really wants, you know, to hear the facts. You're not going to convince somebody on the science necessarily. And I think that's really important to remember. We need to dig deep and awaken our primal brains again and feel our hearts and souls in nature. We need to communicate better at this primitive gut level. That's why I've devoted my life to get kids outside, because we can't begin to protect what we don't know. I consider myself a lucky man because I've always wanted to be a biologist and to study life. Nature isn't something separate. It's who we are. We must reconnect to our primal roots and share our passionate, heartfelt stories with one another. That's why I started TREE in 1990. Outside Day, Campfire Connection, Ignite the Change, and Life Outdoors. Who doesn't want to play outside and be a kid again? That's also why I try to walk the talk and align my beliefs with my behaviors. I rode my bike here today, as I did most every day during my 35-year career. Are you trying to make alignment between your thoughts and personal actions day in and day out? I'm sure you are, but we can all do better. I've even started a blog. It's at the bottom of your page, The Happy Hominid, where my wife and I are trying to share our little lessons on sustainability and getting outside more, okay? It's more cathartic and therapeutic for us than it is whether or not we get an audience or anything. In closing, I am truly inspired by the millennials who are taking up the reins to avert even larger global threats and overcome much more powerful forces than we ever knew 50 years ago. Aaron and Mason represent the most intelligent and the most connected generation that we've ever seen on this planet, and they get it, and we need them as never before. This won't be easy, but we have each other and we're doing the right thing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being involved. Now let's get to some questions.